Alright, so finally gonna do Shaun of the Dead. Uh, just decided I'm not gonna be able to build up the quality of what I do without getting some experience behind it, so I might as well get to it. Shaun of the Dead, released in 2004, written and directed by Edgar Wright, who's gone on to do the rest of the Cornetto trilogy. I'll get to those. As well as did Baby Driver, almost did Ant-Man, except for some issues with the studio, so he had to drop out. Had to. And also co-written by Simon Pegg, who stars as Shaun. Ended up meeting Edgar on the set of Space, the TV show in Britain that I've never seen. Heard it's good. I don't know. And this was also my first foray into zombie films, so it kind of holds a special place in my heart in that way. I have gone to see all of George Romero's zombie movies that he famously made that helped to inspire this one: Night of the Living Dead, Dawn of the Dead, Day of the Dead, and also Land of the Dead. But that one came out after this, and actually Simon Pegg and Edgar Wright both got cameos in it as zombies thanks to this movie just being so good. And it really is. The writing is pretty solid, the acting is pretty top tier, the makeup effects are brilliant. It does one of the things I think zombie anything really hurts at is that, and really most horror, is they want to put the gore and shock up front. This one doesn't. It waits until it's really solid into the third act to give you the gore shot. And it pays off Jeff's kiss brilliantly. And speaking of acts, it's kind of weird. It perfectly fits into three different acts. The first act is Shaun's life falling apart with his girlfriend Liz, and her dumping him because he's stuck in a rut. He never sees his mom, so his stepdad's mad at him, and he doesn't like his stepdad. They've never gotten along. And his roommates, Pete and Ed, are absolute polar opposites. Pete is professional, 9 to 5er, suit and tie to work, whereas Ed sells a bit of weed every now and then and sleeps on the couch and plays video games all day. Absolute polar opposites, which perfectly reflects Shaun, who is stuck in a dead-end job and isn't moving forward with his professional life. His girlfriend, who they've been dating for a while, even met on holiday, which I think is British slang for vacation. I'm not going to get into it. That's just going to start an international incident, and I'm not going to get into a big argument with somebody I can't understand why they're calling me. Yeah, anyway. So, Shaun kind of balances between them. He's sliding towards Ed, but he needs to be a little bit more Pete-ish, so it's really brilliantly done there. And then throughout the first act, we get these hints that something's going on, something's going on, something's going on. Shaun's life goes in the crapper, and zombies. Which I think actually also works out, because if you go back and watch, like, Night of the Living Dead, you kind of wonder, how did all of these people spontaneously turn in a day? Whereas this one says it's already been happening for a day before we really start picking up on that story thread. And then the entire first act also sets up the second act, whereas what does Shaun need to do? He needs to go around his mom's, because he hasn't seen her, and his stepdad Phil, played by the brilliant Bill Nye. Bill Nighy? You know exactly the guy I'm talking about. The kind of guy that if you saw him in a dark alley in the middle of the night, you're just accepting you're gonna die. You just hope it's not gonna hurt. And his mother, Barbara, played by the also brilliant Penelope Wilton, who I'll know from Doctor Who, which I saw after this because it didn't come out till 2005. Yeah, that would have been when she popped in. So it's one of those things. And it really works. He loves his mom, but he hates his stepdad, so there's that weird friction in between all of them. The next step, he's got to get Liz. He's got to get her back. And that means he's got to do something to get her back. And then the last one, sort his life out, which is really kind of the through line of the entire rest of the movie. So when the zombies do pop up, well, I kind of got to backtrack on this, because the movie is set up in a really beautiful show and payoff way. Which brings us here. One morning before work, he goes to the local shop. It's like 3 blocks down. All the local people, a jogger, kid with a soccer ball, all that. Well, when the zombies appear and he makes the same walk, there's no people, and you can see the little things in the background that he wouldn't notice. But this person that was leaving is now dead in their doorway, and the jogger is replaced by a businessman running, and the shop now has blood on the floor, and it's really beautiful. And the movie does it several times. On one hand, that is a little lazy because you're just kind of rewriting the same thing again. So, yeah. But on the other hand, it is a really fantastic payoff and juxtaposition to the before and after. How things have changed, how Shaun has changed, what have you. Now, Ed, played by Nick Frost, who ironically enough went on to be in Doctor Who as Santa. Yeah. I can't judge anybody on that one. He's got a weird charm to him, so he's probably my top 20 Santas. Oh, alright, there you go. Spoiler alert. But they kind of get going, and Ed is so irresponsible that he kind of keeps screwing up left, right, and center. They get a car, but when they get over to Shaun's parents' house, he wants to drive his Phillips, Shaun's stepdad's Jag, so he slams the car into, I believe it was a stop sign. And, I pranged it, so we're gonna have to take the Jag. I'm gonna get a letter. Okay. Which is kind of his through line, is Ed is so irresponsible that Shaun needs to break away from it, and this is kind of that perfect tension moment. If zombies hadn't showed up, he probably would have never gone off on him, which he does a couple of times throughout the film. But Frost and Peg still keep this weird, genuine synergy about them that a lot of best friends will have. You'll argue and scream at each other, and just before you run out the door, you're going to tell them, you go to hell, I'll see you tomorrow. And they really, thanks to their own friendship, it's really solid throughout the film. And then you get Liz and her friends, Diane, not an actress. Let's call it what it is. There's not really a failed actress. There's just an actress without a current job. There you go. There's your insight into Hollywood that I have. And then there's David, the guy friend. If everybody already knows it, he's the guy friend who's friends with your girlfriend, and you know sure as hell that if she ever gave him a "hey, how you doing," he's going for it. One of those guys, and he's real petty towards you. Yeah, I've been that guy. Yeah, I'm probably still part of that guy, but anyway. And so naturally that helps add another wrench into everything for Shaun. Because it's constantly butting heads with David. And I gotta give points to Kate Ashfield, who plays Liz, because she really helps pay off this relationship that's stalled with Shaun. While they met on a holiday, they've been dating for a while, and they still live apart. They're not going on holidays anymore. They're not going forward with their relationship. And even Shaun admits, she's held on. He was supposed to quit drinking beer. He's supposed to quit smoking. All things he never did. And she finally has to say, no, I can't do this. And I really enjoy that scene. It's something everybody has seen. You look at a relationship and you're telling a friend, family member, whoever, hey, this relationship it's junk. You need to bounce. It's not going to go anywhere right now. You need to do something. And in sort of an odd way, it is sort of the big kick in the pants to Shaun, who after a binge night of drinking afterwards, winds up back at the house and hangover, shop, all that. So, goes to get his mom. His stepdad's been bitten. Gets bit again on their way out the door. And then they go get Liz, David, and Di, all piled into the Jag. Having been in one, there's not a lot of room for a bunch of people. Which they did pay off pretty well in the movie, too, thanks to the child locks in the back. Safety first, I guess. I'm not a big fan of them being 30, but I digress. And Bill Nighy, Guy, and Simon Pegg have a beautiful scene with loud raucous music in the back, shoulder to shoulder with everybody. And it's really one of those moments that you see in so many dramas of the stepdad who was really hard on his new stepson because he wants him to be a man, he's got to be tough. And they strike this perfect little emotional chord. And a lot of that has to go to Bill. Just that mild little part of, I know I could never be your dad. I could never replace your dad who you lost so young. But I wanted to be. I did come to love you as a son. I wish I could have been nicer. I just didn't know how. All that. And then he dies. And I got to give Pegg absolute credit here. He is just, you could see it, you could feel it in his voice. He's just holding on because he's about to just bawl. And then he goes off on Ed because Ed's being immature and a dumbass. And it's just that emotional anger. It's not particularly towards somebody, but it's there. And it's just perfect acting from everybody on this. Well, he turns, they run, finally get to the Winchester. Named so because it was the gun used in Night of the Living Dead. A pub that Liz once said she didn't want to die in because that's where she always went with Shaun. Well, that was his big plan. Go to the Winchester because they know where the exits are and Ed can smoke. It must be a British thing, I don't know. Well, they get there, trouble ensues and Shaun has to lead bunch of zombies away. Well, they follow him back and hilarity ensues and then tragedy because Barbara is bitten before they got there during an attack. And David is the, hey, we gotta do something about it. Whereas everybody else is much more on Shaun's side of, his mom just died. You know, you can't really be this way. And then when she does come back, Shaun does put her down. And it's really solid moment. Some movies wouldn't give you that moment to really feel the gravity of what just happened. Luckily, this one does. Which also has David, after that pause, saying, well, you did the right thing. Which is not something you want to say after a guy has to kill his zombie mom. Well, he hits David. David goes down, pulls the gun, tries to fire, but it's empty. Brits don't have a lot of firearms around there, which is one of the reasons why Edgar Wright and Simon Pegg like the idea of a zombie apocalypse in England, because in most American films, there's firearms left, right, and center in everybody's hands, so it kind of diminishes the terror and the power of a zombie horde. So, I gotta give him credit on that one. That's a really smart idea, where you can't use a 50 cal anymore, you have to use a shovel or a wiffle ball bat. So I could preach for an hour and a half on just how well thought out the writing is, and that's because it took them 4 years to write this. So everything was properly baked, cooked, oiled down, scrapped, remade, reboiled. I'm kind of hungry now. But this brings us to the gore scene I was mentioning earlier. I think. But David is full on, no, I'm gonna get out of here. Everything's awkward now. But he gets talked down. No, if you go out there, you're just gonna kill yourself. Don't do it. Stay here. All that. And there's, again, a silent beat is something that can do so much in a movie, especially during action. Now, we just came off of an action. We're about to go back into an action scene, but there's this slight break right there. And David says Shaun. And he's probably going to apologize. Like, this is the moment where their characters are going to finally meet in the middle and try to get over all of it. Just try. But the zombies bust in, pull David out, and rip him apart. And, again, the gore is magnificent. I remember seeing it It might have been 13, 14. Blew me away. I never grew up with horror movies, let alone gory movies. So seeing somebody be ripped apart with their insides being pulled to their outside while he's still shaking his head and screaming isn't something I ever saw before. And it still stuck with me after 16, 17 years, which is really saying something, because I've seen a lot of other stuff, especially in Romero zombie movies. So that was interesting. Well, the zombies get in, Di runs out, waving David's leg because she's going to save him. Okay. Well, Pete shows up. He's a zombie. Bites Ed. Shaun shoots Pete. They climb behind. Everybody else climbs behind the bar. Bar gets lit on fire. They hide in the cellar. And this is the we're done scene. A lot of zombie movies in particular, because it is what it is. You can stop 100 zombies, but there's 100 more right behind them. There's 100 more behind that, 100 more behind that. It's not like with Michael Myers or Jason Voorhees, where once you put them down, they're down. You're good for a year or until you get to the hospital, you know. Ed's dying. They've got 2 shells left. And Shaun and Liz had this quiet moment that you would have of, we're not leaving here. And this is how are we going to go? Are we going to get eaten? Are we going to get lucky and they're not going to bust in, so we're going to get to burn to death? Or are we going to take the rifle way out? Well, they decide they're just going to take the rifle way out because Ed tells them, hey, I'm cool with being eaten. He's good. His slackerness, I guess, coming through with a golden heart moment. Well, that's when they find the keg lift to get them back to the street and get out. Well, he's bad. He's not going. And again, I got to give it to Simon Pegg and Nick Frost on this one, because this is, again, it's another character moment that we've been building to throughout the entire movie. Is we know Ed is well, you can go into work late, let's play video games for a couple hours. Or, oh man, that sucks, you got that work meeting on Saturday because we're going to go drinking Friday night. So I'll just have a cab drop you off in the morning. He's that kind of guy. And this is their last conversation, and it's filled with apologies and remorse. I'm sorry this happened. I'm sorry I yelled at you. And Ed just carries it. Absolutely. Yeah, I'm sorry too. And again, another callback, because he's not really sorry for anything that happened. He's sorry because he farted and he's waiting for Shaun to smell it. He does. Again, I was 13, 14. Farts were still funny. And it's still funny now. I'm sorry. I'm not that mature. And they leave the rifle with Ed, and they leave. And just before they're about to start fighting their way back across the street to try and get out, Army shows up. The day is saved. The movie ends a couple of months later. Shaun and Liz are living in Shaun's old apartment because his roommates are dead. Zombies are now just commonplace, doing game shows, tedious cart returns, which kind of hurts my heart, but here we are. And we find out that Shaun actually has Ed in the shed, chained up to play video games with, which I think is kind of an interesting it's something you don't see in a zombie movie. The pet zombie tied up in the shed so you can play video games. You don't see it that much, and it kind of works. It's who Ed was when he's alive, so the little piece of his head that's still Ed is doing it. I dig it. And Shaun and Liz have gotten back together. Shaun's more adult. You can tell that just by the apartment not being a mess. Granted, Ed isn't allowed inside anymore, so... So, what are my real thoughts on the movie? It's pretty fantastic, honestly. Again, 4 hours of rewriting, rereading, the homages to George Romero's films. I totally missed the first time through. Like, even the Winchester, I never made the connection until 6 months ago or so. So, even now, I strongly believe that there are things I'm missing when I rewatch it. And I've been watching it ever since I first saw it 16, 17 years ago. Where do I think the film kind of falls apart? Well, in sort of this really odd way, there's no big blowout spectacle. And I know that's zombie films aren't war films. They don't need a big explosion every 30 seconds to hold your attention. But it feels kind of anticlimactic in sort of an odd way. Is it as they get closer to the Winchester, they run into more of them. They start losing people. They get to the Winchester. They've lost the window just getting in. Now they're surrounded. Just, it's one of those things that just kind of bug me. It's not really a slight against the film. It's just something that kind of grinds into me. Because in most other films, yeah, there'd have been something before David gets pulled through the window. Which there was, but then we're done. Like, they're literally climbing through the window. We're firing. Oh, Barber's hurt. Hold up a sec. And then the zombies quit coming. It's kind of thin to me, and it's a really thin complaint to have. Another thing I didn't much care for too much. Again, I really enjoy this film, front to back. But one thing I really didn't much care for was just kind of the cavalierness of everybody. Like, aside from Shaun, nobody's really proactive in anything. David and Di just come along because Liz is going. Liz gets kind of talked into going by Shaun. Barbara comes along because Shaun convinced them. Ed comes along because. Really, until they get to the Winchester, nobody even tries to fight other than Shaun. Ed hits a couple with Carr. David and Di and Liz have weapons that they lose when they get out of the Jag. I don't even think they ever pinged a zombie. But that might be just because they didn't have soft props to hit the people in the makeup. Could be that. Things like that do happen, especially with a movie like this. They didn't have a $200 million budget. And they were shooting in England, where, hey, we need this street for an hour, is inconveniencing people. And the British do not like being inconvenienced. We kind of had a disagreement about that, America and Britain. Yeah. Their beer is warm. No, we're good. But really, the entire movie holds up together. Acting is great. Sound design is good. The gore holds up. The makeup is great. The act structure is good. The characters are likable. Even David and Pete, they can kind of grind on you, but that's a grinding because you like Shaun, Ed, and everybody else, and they disagree. It's that good kind of grinding. Like, no, you don't like the guy I like, so I don't like you. It's, again, very thin complaint, because it's very well made. The whole thing. I really do recommend seeing it. But where would I actually rate it on a scale of 1 to 5? When I originally reviewed this a couple of years ago in a written review, I gave it a 5. And I do think it's really good. I just don't know if it's 5 level. Maybe that's just because of all the repeat viewings that it's kind of starting to have diminishing returns for me. But having said that, to a new viewer, especially one who's seen the past Romero films, will pick out all these little tiny nods, little Easter eggs that, in some beyond brilliant forethought, Edgar Wright decided to put in for probably a lot for the old people. Oh boy, I'm going to get a comment on that one. The older generation who grew up watching the Romero films in the same way I grew up watching Shaun of the Dead. So they'll see, like, the Winchester, oh, I get it. Or they'll hear that music that from the end of Dawn of the Dead. Everybody knows it. It's now the theme to Robot Chicken, that one. That's why you know it. Like, all those little things that like, I'd never picked up on the first time, but now that I went back to watch the Romero films for the first time a couple of years ago, now I'm seeing them and, oh, hey, I know that, and I know this, and that reminds me of that. And it's kind of this beautiful little love letter to Romero. But it can still stand on its own 2 feet, which really makes me have to give it a 4. I really want to give it a 5, but a 4 is still pretty damn good. To be a 5, you gotta blow my mind. I gotta be outside picketing and ringing a bell telling people to watch this. And I do strongly think somebody should put this on at least once a year, because it is so good. Having said that, I don't think it's the best of the Cornetto trilogy, which I'll be covering next, hopefully without a month in between. The next film in the Cornetto trilogy being Hot Fuzz. So, hoping I can get that out before Christmas. I've been Rob. Take it easy. And one more thing. Dogs can look up.